Right, so I think we should be all live now. We are streaming it on LinkedIn and YouTube, not on Twitch, which reminds me of a joke. Why aren't there astronauts on Twitch? That's a joke, right? So the answer to that is because you can't hear people stream in space.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was a little poor one, but I had a couple of ones on Mixer and Ninja as well, but those had to fall off by the wayside because of the last couple of days, the announcement a couple of days ago. But nevertheless, I just thought we should get started off with something here. So gaming as an industry is very large, right? It's a huge industry. 2.5 billion people are participating in it. About $150 billion of revenue is being made in this industry. The question is really, and it's a part of the media and entertainment industry. The question is, it is still larger than both the movie industry and the music industry put together, which is very interesting because movie and music industry predates this a lot earlier. So the question is, why has gaming become so powerful, and what is it that has gone into it? So we thought we should put a spotlight on this, and we've been fortunate to get a stellar cast of panel here. So all rock stars, all of you. So I'm going to sort of request you to sort of introduce yourself, but before that, a couple of admin points. You obviously are watching it from LinkedIn or on YouTube. So if you enter your comments or queries, we can actually see it and we can respond to that. So that's what I would request you to do. This event is split up into maybe about 5 parts. So there are 5 themes that we are going to quickly go through, about 10 to 15 minutes each. And the stars are going to sort of talk about it. So my job is to sort of do the introductions and shut up as much as I can. So that's the view that I'm going to sort of take here. Without further ado, should I pass the baton on to maybe Kai? Could you just get started and then we can sort of round up all of us?
Sure. First and foremost, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who's in attendance. It's an exciting time to get together and talk about gaming. My name is Kai Bond. I'm a partner at Courtside Ventures. We were founded in 2016. We're an early stage venture fund that invests in 3 verticals: sports, gaming, and fitness. I lead the gaming and esports investments on our team. We've done over 50 investments so far, 15 in the gaming and esports ecosystem. And we invest along 3 areas: studios that create original IP, social and community. So what are people doing in and around games? And core tech and tools. What is the infrastructure needed for this next generation of cloud-based games? So thanks again for having me. Looking forward to chatting today.
Super. So Ivan, do you want to go next?
Yes, great. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I think it's very exciting to have all these experts speaking together, and with the focus about India, which is definitely a great country for gaming, and whereas there is still a lot to do and to set up. I'm working in the video games industry for 26 years, and in development, publishing, and for 10 years I'm an expert in cloud gaming. And I raised GameStream 5 years ago, and we are providing cloud gaming services to telecom groups and hotel groups worldwide, with clients in Asia. We have clients in Indonesia, Taiwan, and soon in a few other countries.
Super. So Reinhard?
Yep.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And so yeah, in short, quite a long time in gaming. Started a few companies, also invested, and there to use my experience throughout the years, talking to management, investors, and work on strategy, road mapping, as I call it, the storytelling in and around gaming companies.
Super. And I want to round it off with Manish.
Thanks, Rajiv. Namaskar. Namaste, everyone. This is Manish. I'm CEO for Nazara. We are one of the largest gaming company in India. Have been personally involved in gaming since 2009. From an Indian point of view, it's pretty long term and pretty long time. I remember saying that in 2009, gaming is going to take off, and here we are in 2020, and I'll still tell you the gaming is going to take off. Yeah. So I think that's the perseverance, patience required in an Indian gaming industry. And if somebody wants to really have a good example of being a core evangelist of something which they truly believe in, please look no further. Look here and you will find someone who has been saying that gaming is the next big thing in the town. And yeah, a lot of people have come, a lot of people have gone, a lot of people will still be skeptical. But I believe that this is exactly what Rajiv started saying, that this is going to be bigger than any movie. And in India, where Bollywood, Tollywood, Collywood, we have so many movie centers saying that gaming would be bigger than movies, I'm going to be making a blasphemous statement. And a lot of people will come after me. So I'm happy to be trolled. Thank you very much.
I admire your perseverance. I can tell you that in the US, when I worked on my first mobile title in 2006, it was on a terrible flip phone with a tiny screen, and all you had was up, down, left, right, soft key 1, soft key 2, and that was your input and controls. And so, you finally wait for the ecosystem to develop, the screens, the networks, right, all of these things to come together. So stay at it. It will happen.
It'll happen. I know that. I absolutely know that. I remember the Nokia OV days. I don't know how many of you really know Nokia OV store.
Don't go there.
And we were the largest game publisher on Nokia OV store not because we did some jack shit, just that India had so many Nokia phones. As simple as that. Yeah, so that's what really happened, and we made some very interesting local content and all that. And I knew that people love gaming. People like interactivity of it. They like instant entertainment and all that stuff. So I think I have no doubt. The self-conviction is very high, and don't worry, I'll not be shaken easily.
Super. Okay, with that round of intro and I think that interesting observation, let's sort of get started. So the first theme that I wanted to bring up on stage was basically what I would call, can you folks see it? Yeah. So what I would call mining for gold. So basically, this is about the evolution of the gaming industry and how we have gotten here, right? A little bit of history here, perhaps, right? So for a while, around 20 years ago, gaming meant the console, right? The console was basically dominantly focused in Japan. You had the Nintendos and the Sonys that were making it, and the better console meant the better gaming experience. So that was what it was. And then somehow the center of gravity shifted to the US and maybe to the UK a little bit, with the big game developers. So you had the Activisions and you had other folks that sort of came in and did that. And that was the age of the superheroes of the game studios, right? And then something happened interesting after this. So until this time, it was still, the entire industry was all about, those countries that were sort of involved in the creation of it as well. So not really spread beyond that. But after that, digital happened. And during the course of digital, there was an explosion in innovation and other things that happened. It started off in Korea and then it went on to China. And you started to see a mushrooming of completely new models and ideas. Guys like Tencent and other folks came about, right? So, as this thing happened, obviously the market has spread out a lot more, and the center of gravity has slowly shifted into the emerging markets right now. Obviously, China being one of the centers. But on top of that, there is a lot of action now in Southeast Asia, India, of course. We are talking about it. There's also Latin America, and then there is Africa. So all of these countries are now starting to get involved. So with all of this, I think, one thought that we wanted to have was basically to try and explore where, what were the inflection points in the industry and what worked and what did not work and how did we get here. So I just thought maybe we should spend a few minutes on that. So again, I want to get started with maybe the North American viewpoint, perhaps. Kai, do you want to talk about it? Given that you're sitting in Northeastern US right now, coming to us.
Sure, yeah, happy to. I think the evolution of gaming in the US and the growth in terms of revenue and reach is a fascinating story, right? You start with the console ecosystem and buying, packaged games. You move through an evolution of free-to-play online gaming that became really big. You saw growth in mobile gaming. And, what you see at each one of these inflection points is really three things. One is, a distribution mechanism that onboards users in a really frictionless way, whether that's Facebook gaming. You see, pricing, right? So free to play Facebook games, you see, mobile games going free to play. And so when you see this change in distribution, You see the change in pricing coming from a $60, packaged game down to, a $3 and then inevitably a free-to-play game with a sophisticated app store. And you see where technology comes in. So, here in the US, mobile gaming, when I talked about in 2006, you had 2G networks and flip phones, right? And then Apple comes along and has a proper app store and a capable screen, a capable device, high-speed networks. You start to get 3G, ubiquitous Wi-Fi. And so I think at every single point in time, when you see a new multi-billion-dollar studio, when you see massive growth in the industry, you see a change in pricing, you see a change in distribution, you see enabling technology that brings this forward. And, I think that's what makes probably, everyone on this call quite excited, is that we are at an inflection point now. You're seeing cloud distribution becoming really, really meaningful. You see the large players like Microsoft and Amazon and now Google going after cloud-based gaming. And, I think the one thing that we can't, dismiss about this is you can have all of those elements, but what you still need is great IP, right? And at each one of those, there is a studio at the heart of it that identifies how a user experience is going to change with this adoption of new tech, distribution, and pricing. And so you see these category winners, the Zyngas, who started out in free-to-play and then evolved into mobile and really are now a mobile-first company. I find it fascinating to look at Stadia because Microsoft did this so well early in the days when, they developed, with Bungie, Halo as a gravitational pull towards Xbox, right, on that platform. And I think, Nintendo did it best first, and you see this anchor kind of IP that gives people a reason to come to your new service. And so I think, what the excitement from my perspective in a venture ecosystem is, how can we identify both the core technology, the IP around this ecosystem where cloud has so much to deliver.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kai, for that input. So I just thought we should hear from the viewpoint in Amsterdam. Reinout, what is your point of view here?
It's funny you mentioning IP. So let me start further going on the IP. So what I've actually been seeing in the last couple of months is that the industry was actually talking all the time about IP. So if you, for example, look at a company in Finland, Next Games, they have the IP of The Walking Dead. So everyone is saying like, yeah, and that sort of is the future. But what I saw during COVID is actually that IPs like FIFA, NASCAR actually were maybe surprised how things went. So during our call yesterday, I was mentioning that in the US, a lot of old folks are actually going to NASCAR to see the races live. And when COVID came, they weren't allowed to visit those races. And actually the drivers itself, they needed to train and wanted to be involved and started to drive and race online, where the old folks actually met the young folks online. So I think it took COVID to get the consoles like Microsoft Xbox, when they always said like, hey, this is the center, it's the entertainment center of the house, finally happened where mom, dad, son and daughter actually were sitting on the couch and could actually watch video games, actually watching esports or whatever you want to call it. So in terms of IP, I think today it's very interesting to see different angles on how you can do, first of all, marketing for your current IP. In fact, I just bring it in right now because I always say entertainment is gaming, but gaming is entertainment. And next to that, when I saw Trolls, the movie, going actually online instead of first going premiere in a cinema and doing 100 million plus in the first weekend, yeah, I guess we're going to see more like a dynamic hybrid model where you can actually play single, you can play multiplayer, you can watch, you can participate in tournaments. It can be an IP that was a movie or a book or whatsoever. It's all coming together in gaming. And I think that's something that maybe COVID came a little bit too early for all of this, but it definitely accelerated various models on how a game studio today can actually bring their new games obviously through cloud gaming, but much more, I would say, in terms of marketing, branding. I think it's a whole play of interesting models, so to say.
Super. Reinout, thank you so much. Ivan, over to you. What does the Paris viewpoint say? The center of fashion and all that good stuff.
No, I'm working video games for 25 years, and so I have seen this market evolving from PC to console and mobile, and now to the cloud systems. And my first computer was very expensive. It was a real relevant when you were going with your father to buy a computer in a store. I mean, you all had that, right? And it was very expensive. It was a Christmas and a birthday gift as well. And today everyone has mobile phone, and so processing power is much cheaper than it used to be, and game is accessible anywhere, anytime. I mean, for most of the people, it's interesting to see how all of these stories started in Western countries, but there is such a big attraction from India and other countries in Asia and anywhere for video games. I mean, gaming is just something natural for the human being. And the World Health Organization, when the COVID started, told everyone, play video games. And I love that. It was very recent. It was in the end of March they said that. And so that's true. I mean, playing is something in the nature of human. And today, almost everyone can play. And I think that this democratization is fantastic. That's a great step for the video games industry. And we still have a lot to do. And that's our way to think about business. We think about where we could provide our cloud gaming services, because there is a real interest from the public, and they don't have an access to console or to mobile phones or to whatever. For example, in China, around 50% of the mobile phone owners don't have a mobile phone powerful enough to play Android games. That's very stupid, but they are selling some big smartphones for $90 and for the screen to watch videos, but it's not powerful enough to play basic Android games. And it means that to this public and to a lot of public worldwide, we still need and we still have, the ability to provide video games. And I believe that cloud and cloud-based games are definitely the answer for that. And so we are, like Manish said, we are still in a start, and it's always starting again. That's why this industry is fantastic. I don't hear you.
I think, Rajiv, you're still on mute.
Rajiv,
Sorry.
you're on mute. Rajiv, you're on mute.
Sorry. Fantastic. It is all in the cloud and in the heavens. So fantastic view, Yvonne. So fabulous. Manish, what is your take as a closing out point?
Yeah, I think the Indian gaming company sitting in India has to have their head in the cloud and feet on the ground. Yeah, and if you don't do that, then you are going to falter. So I think that is the story of an Indian gaming company, is that you need to really understand who is your target audience. Is it sitting in US and you're making games for them, sitting outside India, or you are making it for India? And then what kind of business models do you want to evolve? What kind of investment do you want to do? What kind of segment do you want to look at? So which is why I said, if your feet are not on ground firmly, you can really get carried away with variety of tech plays which fascinate all of us in gaming industry, and which are a trend, whether in East or West. So just be very clear on what you are making, and I think the real tenacity of an Indian gaming company comes from that. You should know what's happening around it, but then take a dose of reality and figure out how to really ensure you create a business which you could really scale over a period of time, knowing fully well that you are here in for long haul, and every 2 years, 3 years, it will be start from zero, because something will completely disrupt the existing model.
Fabulous. And that's the last word on the. I'm presuming I'm still audible and I'm not muted or any of those horrible things that technology could potentially do to me. But let's quickly move on to the next topic. This topic is a little bit more topical. I'm going to try and bring in the viewpoint around what's happening in the recent times. Whatever can be said about COVID, a lot has been said. I'm not going to talk about that. But the one thing that I think we can all agree on is basically that, what this has done, what the lockdown has done, what the last 3 months has done, is it has actually pushed digitization of the consumer. If you think about the world as going towards digitization, it has pushed the digitization into an accelerated path. So in some senses, one can say that what could have perhaps taken a couple of years or maybe even 3 years for the consumer to get to in terms of digital consumption access and things that they would do on the mobile phone or that has now been compressed into a small window of about 2-3 months. So that seems to be something that I think we can all agree upon. And that's reflecting upon, the consumption patterns as we are seeing across everything. So whether it be Twitch, whether it be Zoom, whether it be, YouTube, whether it be Netflix, we're seeing the consumption explode. Obviously, that means that consumption has exploded in gaming as well. And that I think is a self-evident thing. But what I wanted to try and touch upon here basically is to talk about what that means from different perspectives for gaming development and for the industry. So one part is really, does it change monetization, for instance? Does it increase or change the kind of ways people can get money out of the consumer? Obviously, it is going to increase. There's more interest. What can we do there? And corollary to that, or a consequence of that, what happens to fundraising? So where is the funding option around this? We ourselves, we have invested in a couple of, gaming companies, and we are ourselves looking at this space in a reasonable big way. And I just thought we could get started perhaps with Yvon here. And Yvon, you're obviously you're doing your business, but you're also in the middle of fundraising, and you're perhaps very apt to get started on this topic in terms of how are things going for you right now, post the lockdown.
Yes, thank you. So we have some ventures people listening to us. So I will try to be careful with what I'm saying. So I don't know the situation worldwide, but in Europe, it's true that with the COVID stuff, investment have been frozen, not stopped, but just frozen. Like a lot of companies decided to focus on their existing partnership and their existing investment, and to see how they could help these companies where they were already shareholders, and they kept aside some other companies where they are supposed to invest. And I think that it's starting again. I mean, in Europe, where the COVID crisis is, I would say, getting better. I don't know your feeling about that, Reynald, but I think that is getting better. You have people at the Paris cafe terrace everywhere, and we feel good. And so investment is starting again. We have a lot of VCs calling us right now, but there was a freeze during 3 months. And so on our side, we wanted to close a round in April, and we closed the round in April, but we closed the round with private investors and industrials, and not with VCs, and the VCs are supposed to come later. So we raised 5 million euros in the last 15 months, and within 3.5 million euros in April. And we will continue raising like 2-3 millions next in the coming month. And I think it's interesting still to have a VC, because in this kind of crisis, it's interesting to have some experts in global situations, I would say, with investment in many companies, so they can see how it works in other companies, and they can provide you some proposals to answer that, or to help each other. And so I think that that's not something that the private investor would do. So I'm still attracted by VCs. And on my side, the big evolution with this crisis, COVID crisis as well, was that our B2B business model has been strengthened. First of all, because telecom groups and social networks have proven that they are very useful to the people. We can thank Microsoft and Facebook and LinkedIn to be there, because when working from home, it was very important for everyone to get connected. And so I think that a lot of people understood how much we need to be connected. And thanks to that, I think that the interest for global streaming multiplayer solutions and the interest for everything creating socialization with the internet is very attractive today for investors.
Super. So great to hear that. I think you'll find some action in the telecom space in India as well, Yvon. I work with Jio, and I can tell you that there's a lot of excitement happening, and you've seen that about $25 billion have come into Jio right now. They have to spend it somewhere, so hopefully, power to you. Great that you were able to raise 5 million euros. That's fabulous. I think
it's not so much money, but we are a 35 people company, and we started from zero a few years ago. So we try to go step by step, and but it's nothing in comparison with $5.7 billion invested by Facebook with Geo, right? Or with
it's now gone up to 25 billion almost, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
It's sort of getting up there.
Sure.
Excellent. So I think I wanted Kai to jump onto this. Kai, every time we have spoken, I know that you're in a flurry of meeting companies, meeting game developers. I think there's a lot of action happening on your side. So what do you see from the other side of the spectrum, from the dark side, as it were?
Yes. And as a 3-time founder, I started a company in 2007 before the market crashed in 2008. And I think we see something very consistent. If you look at the history of gaming in a post-recessionary environment, post-pandemic environment as well, engagement is through the roof, right? It is one of the most economical forms of entertainment you can possibly have, right? So you want to take your family to the movies on a Friday night. You're talking about the tickets, the food, the snacks, right? The pizza out for dinner. For that, you're going to get hundreds of hours of gameplay, literally months of entertainment for what might be a 3 or 4 hour, evening out. And so I think it's important, we published a piece that talked a little bit about, gaming in a recessionary environment. And, for the pound for pound value, it is by far the best you can have. So, that's one observation just in terms of what's going on now. What people are pointing to has been consistent really through every single downturn that we've ever seen. To talk about a little bit about, the flow of VC dollars, I would agree in general, that the amount of money flowing out the first 60 to 90 days, let's call it post-COVID, depending on where you were on the planet and sort of how impacted your country was, there was a massive shutdown, right? So from a venture perspective, we've done 8 investments. We have to go and look at our portfolio, understand which companies are going to have capital restraints, what are going to have capital concerns. And our first priority is to make sure that our existing investments have enough runway. So, we stopped everything for 30 days. You look at your portfolio, you have the emergency board meeting, you make sure that they're staffed appropriately, that they have the amount of runway that they need. And then, when we go back out into the market and we look at this, you have to put it in this historical context, which is what is sustainable, right? So everybody is, opportunistic in the, entrepreneurial world. And so obviously you want to go out and raise when your metrics and KPIs are increasing, doubling, tripling, week by week. And so that makes a lot of sense to us. I think what the challenge always is, what happens, post-COVID, then you have the summer, so kids are home, right? And they're playing a lot, people have more free time and leisure activities, things tend to slow down a little bit. Maybe you have long weekends. And so now you're starting to see this, swell of engagement. And we've seen it time and time with, our dozens of investments that as soon as September hits, you have a steady rise from May through August. And then you start to get the back to school and the parents crack down on the kids. And then, gaming dips off a little bit. And so, for us, it's important to understand what are the long lasting businesses? What is a fad? What is something that actually has staying power? So, I would agree things have slowed down. What I would say, though, overall, if you look at the amount of global dollars raised by venture capital firms in the last 5 to 7 years, it's been an incredible amount of capital in the tens of billions of dollars, and that's spread throughout the ecosystem at early stage and in late stage, right? And I think that there is actually a new understanding from some of the older VC firms who hadn't traditionally invested in gaming. There are this group of emerging funds that are focused on it and have grown up kind of playing games, and it's acceptable, right? For my kid to play games, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Of course, who cares? I grew up playing, FIFA. I grew up playing Madden. These games are great entertainment. There isn't the same stigma that there once was. And I think the realization now that everybody was sheltered in place, that people understood what the social aspects were, right? When you see a Travis Scott concert in Fortnite attracting 12.3 million viewers, right? You're talking about selling out the Garden 600 nights in a row. It's just not possible. You can't do this, right? And the experience of that concert was incredible, right? And I know a lot of parents who are like, I'm in New York. Like, I'd rather have my kids sitting here watching it, talking to their friends, because like if they go out to Webster Hall and there's like a whole bunch of weed smoking and alcohol available, it's actually better for my kids to socialize in this type of environment. And they're starting to break this stigma of what is this sort of negative view of gaming, and that it actually is something that's interactive, social, engaging, fun for not just their kids, for the adults. And so we're in an exciting moment in time. My belief is that we'll see a lot more dedicated venture funds focused on gaming. And I think that we'll also see large funds continue to build out their expertise around this vertical and place more of a percentage of their overall dollars into the ecosystem. I am concerned that some of the larger VCs, and I'm sure the folks on this call know this, is that if they're not 100% familiar, it's going to look a lot like maybe the VR AR investment world, where people made 7 or 8 scattershot investments. It was ahead of their time, and it fizzled out, right? And then there's this pullback where they don't want to deploy capital anymore. And so the last thing you want to see is capital going out, and then a whole bunch of companies getting to this point where they need additional, mezzanine, 10, 15, $25 million of capital. It's not available to them. And so I think that's what we're, very concerned about more than anything. Isn't the initial 1 to 10 million, it's that 10 to 25, and making sure that there's a consistent, healthy chunk of later stage capital available for these companies.
Super. I'm still, zoned out on the concert at this point in time. So a concert every fortnight sounds like a great idea. So Reinhard, you have also explored a bunch of these things. I think you have spoken a little bit about fast forward in some of your conversations earlier. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the post, environment?
No. When you prep something like this, you have an idea of what you actually want to get across. And listening to Ivan and Kai, I hear some very interesting angles, thoughts. First of all, congratulations with raising funding. But let me start with what I'm hearing a lot. Gaming is recession-proof. It's to one side of the business, it's a bullshit story, and to the other side of the business, it's really true. I mean, revenues go up because, one way to another. This time we were isolated. 2008, there was a financial crisis. So when you have time to spare, obviously people will search for entertainment. So. And since I'm a very much believer that entertainment is gaming, there you go. But there were a lot of companies and also investors that went into 20 with a high amount of confidence, a high amount of raising funding, and your roadmap also when you do funding. There's a proper storytelling to it. There is a forecast to it. And actually, Q1 did see some very interesting acquisitions and funding rounds. I would say Q1 took here in Europe, let's say, till end of Feb. After that, a lot of things came to halt. And that could be because investors were taking the time off to look at their current portfolio, but also were a bit scared to invest at that proper time or that moment in time. But also, I think they didn't know how long everything would take. They didn't have an idea of actually the recession-proof concept of this industry, which they're now going to see. And you get many, many reports. And you get Fortnite being viewed so many times by so many people. And even when it's repeated, it is. But I still think it's tough out there rating because for some, this is taking too long, and they were actually on the verge of they had a runway, and if the runway is up, the runway is up. I mean, there's a point of no return, you know. So they haven't raised. So I still expect companies to struggle, at least to say it at a very nice way. What I'm seeing right now is that companies are actually raising, and yeah, there was an initiative, and I saw more initiative, but one specific that Rajiv is mentioning was Fast Forward Games in London, where some clever guys, angel investors, but also experience working within a funds or set up funds that actually came up with an idea like, okay, how can we do a sort of a fast procedure of raising, or actually putting money into companies. I haven't gotten any results yet as a feedback, which I will do, obviously, but they got crushed with so many people that send in their pitch decks. Where I think we stand today is that, yeah, gaming obviously is recession proof. Money is there, but money is careful. So I think valuation wise, if you're actually in a startup phase, you might actually come down from your high horse. But if your company is showing good traction, a proper revenue model, then it's business as usual. You can raise money, which actually in the last couple of weeks you should have seen on if you read VentureBeat, Pocket Gamer, Games Industry altogether.
Okay. We are getting quite a few questions on what kind of categories are working. So Manish, as you summarize this, you obviously are in this field, have been around, been investing, been a part of this game. You might want to talk about the trends that we spoke about, but also talk about what kind of segments are going out. And maybe you folks could add on what are the segments that are currently getting invested, which is getting hotter right now. Is it things like esports? Is it obviously that is likely to be where we are going? Casual gaming? Is it those kind of basically some questions around that. So Manish, over to you, and then we'll just have a couple of responses to the queries from the audience. Manish, I think you.
Thank you. So I think on the COVID, one good thing which has happened is in India where gaming was not mainstream. Now suddenly everyone, their uncle and aunties are talking about gaming. I think that's one big thing, and a lot of funds, lot of investors. It's like big gold rush. That, oh my God, gaming is going to happen. Let me not see this buses. I don't want to lose this bus. Let me kind of ride on this bus. I think as I started my introduction that it's been 11, 12 years, I'm saying gaming is going to happen. I think now the whole chorus is saying, and I'm happy. I'm listening to the music of it. So that's one big thing. One big thing has happened is that everybody's kind of talking about gaming happening from a perspective of, sorry guys, from the perspective of, I think 2-3 things which are again happening on gaming. A lot of excitement. It will translate into companies which are doing really well because a lot of guys who really are in the midst of understanding gaming, levers of what really drives, what kind of companies will do well and all of it. From that perspective, I think the guys who have made some mark, they have made some tentpole, they have got great story of growth and underlying unit economics and levers, they will get a great funding. The Indian ecosystem still, I think, is scared and nervous of really backing a lot of young startups, a lot of young companies, and a lot of unproven metrics, because the market size is really being seen as very big, and people want to really back still the proven gaming companies and proven gaming models, rather than trying to really have a very broad-based ecosystem which is really supporting a lot of startups. So I think that's something is still, we are not there. We would be there in some few years, few quarters. I think that cycle has been accelerated because the desire to look at gaming companies has increased. So every fund in this country would be now has a youngster, young MBA who has been calling all gaming companies and saying that, okay, what do you do? So I think that's one very positive thing which has happened. What are the areas which, as I said, India has its own unique model. You have casual games, real money gaming, which is really is an exciting model, which is very unique to India and which is emerged on the lines of skills in US. Then there is obviously the esports, the sexiness of esports about the whole youngsters watching people playing games and the whole excitement around this as a new sports content, new sports media business. I think that's something which is very exciting. Anything around subscription business model is very exciting because it creates a very tangible cohorts which people can understand, people can relate to. They can understand CAC, break-even, LTV, CAC ratios, and all that stuff, which is something adjacent to other businesses which the investors have been investing. So I think those are the kind of sentiments which are happening here. From a consumer's point of view, I think in India, gaming is not truly becoming mainstream, and there is no doubt about it. With everyone being locked down, and if you have tried just being with friends or family on a Zoom call and you have no context, the call may finish in 5-10 minutes, because beyond a point, how are you doing, what's happening, you really don't know what to do more beyond that. Yeah. So what do you really kind of do that after is that how do you really create context which is meaningful, entertaining, where entire family comes together to play and all that stuff, right? And that's where people are playing housey, or people are playing some around musical games, or people are playing Ludo, or people are playing something else. So it's the whole multiplayer gaming, which is really interactive entertainment, which is seeped. Second thing which is seeped is gaming is new community. I think one is passive consumption of somebody putting their pictures, how good am I looking, or how good is my dish looking. Now moving beyond to that, creating live experiences of interacting with each other during playing the game and chatting and communicating. So gaming is the new community, which is what Indians have realized. And I think that's not going to go away. So social multiplayer gaming is here. In spite of the, I may say, Rajiv may not like it, poor infrastructure still of telco. Yeah, we are still way, way, way behind from anywhere else in the world. But yes, we love to manage with what the resources. So we believe that if somebody gives you lemon, make a lemonade out of it. So that's what is happening right now. Yeah. So I think that's what is happening in India.
Excellent. And I also love those brief interludes with your little one coming and giving you a hug. So good welcome relief there. Excellent. So before we move on to the next one, Kai, I mean, is there a difference in terms of what kind of companies are now getting the investment? I mean, do you have any early thoughts? Are you favoring any segment over the others?
We divide our investments across 3 areas, right? So studios that are creating games, social and community, what are people doing in and around? We put esports into that bucket. And then core tech and tools, right? What is the infrastructure? So, I think that there are opportunities. I think, when you look at, I came from Comcast Ventures. It's one of the largest telcos in the US. Their network engineers are the ones that were coming to management and saying, look at how much data we have. We're telling you gaming is what's driving all of our network traffic, right? And so we've made investments in network optimization software that's sold as a SaaS business to ISPs. I think inevitably for us, it comes down to a great founder at the right moment in time. So, I do think that what we're seeing in the esports ecosystem in the US around teams, around sort of organized events, that seems to be cooling off, right? When you look at the global games industry and is approaching $160 billion, there's a ton of excitement, a ton of eyeballs around esports. And a ton of interest around streaming, but I think Microsoft shutting down Mixer is a pretty clear indication of how strong the network effects need to be to sustain a dedicated streaming ecosystem. And I think that's true of tournaments. I think that's true of teams. You see a lot of people who own teams now trying to dissolve their positions and figure out how to sell those. And so there's a lot of question marks. Our fundamental belief is that gaming is fun. It's entertainment, right? And so there is a segment at the top that might want to be competitive, but the vast majority of people, my mom playing Words with Friends, right? My dad doing crossword puzzles, right? Do you consider them a traditional gamer? I asked my mom, are you a gamer? No. Well, do you play video games on your phone? Yes. How often? Well, a little bit in the morning, some in the afternoon, some in the night. I'm like, you play more than me. It's like she played for an hour and a half yesterday. I played for 25 minutes because I had to test out a new game, but it was just to like kind of immerse myself in the new IP. So I think there's this, stigma around who was a gamer and what it means to be a gamer that's now being broken down. And for us, that bottom of the pyramid, that huge kind of segment of gamers who are, casual, the original, these guys were on the phone, Bejeweled and Zuma, right? Like these games, the original match series that predated the King.com, these are amazing IP, Hexic, Mizaki Blocks, you go on and on. I could play those games for 50 years. Right. And so I just think that there's too much of a focus put on the competitive aspect of gaming. I do think that there's entertainment value there. I do think that there are a lot of people that want to be competitive gamers, but I think it's blown out of proportion. I still think the vast majority of people want sheer entertainment, and that's what we are trying to invest in.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean,
I think, sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. If you're not speaking, just please go on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it used to be very easy. I mean, the world was divided between casual gamers, hardcore gamers, and then started to speak about mid-core gamers. But I have the same story about my parents, as they play maybe 3 hours per day in card games on mobile, but they say, I'm not a gamer. They are a gamer. So, and it's completely a question of attitude. What people want today, how we provide that. And it's true that we cannot think like we used to with this various classification of gamers. It's another story today, and we don't have the right vocabulary for that right now. We don't have a common vocabulary. I had a question for Manish. I would like to know which kind of games could be successful in India, and if episodic games like TV series are very popular in India, but do you think that episodic games can be successful in India as well?
See, India is a very unique market. From a point of view, there are people in India which are very global in their thinking and their perspective, right? And then there is a very, very large, vast majority of population which has no exposure to the global content, global culture, global perspective. So it's a very, if I were to loosely say, two homogeneous segments, which you will find, and then there is heterogeneity within each, but I'll spare you for that. But if you were to look at the global audience, roughly around 100 million people, which is where highly tech-savvy, affluent, very, very well connected with the West, for them, it's the games which are being played in Europe or in US. That's the same games they are playing because they have their teams across the continents. They have exposures, and so that's what is the audience which is looking at. And then there is your 300 million, 250 million people which are completely playing games which are either gaming brands like your Temple Run your Candy Crush or Subway Surfer. They are gaming brands, or even more, they are playing game mechanics which they are familiar with, like the board games which we were playing when we were kids and we were brought up. And those kind of board games, which I have now changed the mode of payment from a physical board game to a digital board. So second thing is, I really don't need to be confined to playing with my family here. With the multiplayer aspect of those board games, I can play with anyone and then can really have fun and thrill and entertainment. So if you look at the largest and biggest game in India, it's about Ludo, which is Pachisi for the guys who are in Spain. And that's the game which we all have played since we were kids, and it's avidly played today also. Now that game has taken India by storm. Similarly, Carom, which is about a kind of a pool game, which is very, very, very popular. Or the card games. Now the card games are not blackjack, they are not things. These are the card games which we were playing, we have been playing. So when you look at the games, there are a lot of local content which is being played by 250 million addressable. And then there are your MOBAs and there are SLGs and RPGs and RTS and racing, which is about 100 million people. So I think...
Yeah, so it's not about budget, it's more about accessibility, right?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yes, so it's not so much about budget. You don't need millions of dollars investment for one game. It's more about the accessibility of these games, right?
And then beyond that, how the game, it's basically, if you're looking at a game of cards or game of a board game, the game mechanics is common. You can make it, I can make it. but it's the underlying matchmaking of multiplayer and your element and how strong is your AI ML of your underlying, which is supporting the basic gameplay. I think that is what is more important.
Accessibility.
So there is an interesting question from the audience. Basically, this is in context of, I suppose, Twitch or any of these guys. So the question is really: is it possible for you to be successful in the gaming world without actually creating IP in terms of games, right? So basically, sort of like what Valve did with just going into Steam and then sort of forgetting the gaming side of it or game developing side of it, perhaps, or whatever. So any thoughts on this panel?
Kai, you want to go for it?
Is it possible for you to be successful in the gaming world without having game IP?
Yes. So
Twitch is one. I think Steam is one.
Yeah. Look, from a publisher perspective, you look at a company like, like Amazon buying Twitch, right? Obviously, there's plays. You look at, we made an investment in a company called 100 Thieves, right? We think they're probably one of the world's best lifestyle brands around gaming and esports. They have good relationships with Nike. Their merch does incredibly well, right? And they have global reach. I think you'll see pockets outside of studios that are creating original IP. I think, you'll always see publisher models that are coming up. There's a really interesting company in Africa called Carry First, right? And Carry First is creating one of the largest publishing businesses on the continent. And so, there will always be pockets. Publishing is a particularly interesting space. You'll see, again, we've talked about, Yvonne has this, business in the cloud infrastructure side. So I think, as you look at the evolution of, what we will need in this industry, we look at network optimization software in the ISP and the telco space. We look at cloud as distribution and publishing platforms. So I think there are a lot of ways you can make money in and around the gaming ecosystem. I think, in the US, when you look at, right now, 85% of the EBITDA is coming from studios and publishers. Right. And if you're looking at roughly what I think it was last year, we're looking at something around 40 billion this year. So, you're talking about $6 billion of money that's out there in non-IP, non-publisher. So it's big, but that's poised to grow exponentially, as is esports. Right? There's a reason why we as venture capitalists are looking at these emerging spaces, because they might be a fraction of the overall revenue now. The promise is that they will become very big in a larger part of the ecosystem. That being said, there's a reason why we invest in studios, right? There's a reason why we invest in IP. It might be the riskier, part of the market. And so from a portfolio construction perspective, we might invest more in studios and have some bets along the way in other verticals and categories around gaming. But, we're excited about all the aspects of gaming, not just studios.
Super. In the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll move on to the next, question, right? And we can sort of quickly get on to the topic or the theme. So this has got a little bit of a perspective as to where India is going forward, and I thought what we could do is perhaps have the ones from outside weigh in first in terms of what could be the potential paths, and then Manish, you can sort of try and cover this or close this. So basically, we've got two different models right now in the world, right? So you've got the Eagle model or the first world model, which is basically, we have explored America, Europe, maybe Japan a little bit, where they've gone, what they've done. And then you've got the digital innovation model, piracy-led, because of which they had to come up with innovative models of, sort of making money. So they went into, creating money. I mean, timeshare or renting the, the kind of game and all that stuff, and in-app purchases and everything else became different. So that's the model that the Koreans and the Chinese followed. And now we have come up with the model. India is still very early right now, but the model India is evolving and is very different. I think Manish made the point that basically more than half of the Indian market is actually real money gaming, which is different from what has happened in the first world. So the question is really, as India becomes bigger, it's now 300-400 million people that are playing the game right now in India. No pun intended here. Where does it go? What is the path that it takes? Right. So maybe. Yvonne, you've spent a couple of years in Hong Kong. I know that you've got a point of view on this. Do you want to start talking about this, and then we can sort of, quickly, get the round?
Well, yes. it's I mean, it will take a long time to discuss about the content, for example, for Chinese or India or US, and maybe we can write a book about that. But I think it's difficult to compare a situation in Western countries and India with a situation in other countries where the content needs to be approved by a government before it's released for the public. And there's a case in China where, you know, when you want to publish something, you need to get an approval from a specific ministry. It's not so easy to provide anything, right? And it took years to hardware manufacturers to have the right to provide some console in China. And I have to say, I'm still wondering, when we think about Chinese people and the fact they love playing on mobile. And I go to China many of them, and every time in the subway, in the street, when I speak to people, I'm asking them if they would have a console, if they would better like to play on a console or on a mobile. And most of them say they would love playing on console on a large, big screen. So, you know, I'm never sure that this Chinese market is absolutely a market for mobile. I think they don't have the choice, and that's what they have today. And maybe that's not what people would like, in fact. And for India, I have everything to learn from you and Manish, and to explain me what is the Indian market. But since, you know, India is the largest democracy worldwide, I think that maybe, you know, they would have the freedom to get the game they want, and I think that's a great thing, and that's beautiful. And so I believe that maybe the Indian market will evolve like all markets. It was interesting to learn to listen Manish when he was speaking about board games and other kind of games. I was thinking about, you know, the Yahoo platform in the 90s, and thinking that like video games are starting in India, and so we have to think content like 20 years ago in France, but with all the fantastic infrastructure and hardware and device we have today. And that's intellectually very interesting to think about that. And not just to speak about esports. First of all, you know, NASCAR on TV and Formula One on TV have completely evolved due to video games, because the public was asking the broadcasting systems to change the cameras and to be on the same place than on a video game. The way to provide NBA and you know, NBA from 2K and EA, the fans of the video game wrote to the publisher to ask them to add advertising to be like in real life. So there is a clear relation between sports and the spectators, and it's on both ways. And I believe that esports started like a very classy esports for people who can, you know, acquire some GPUs at 2,000 euros. And I think that today esports is getting more and more democratized. And I think that, again, the cloud gaming is a great solution to provide everyone with the same kind of streaming from the same GPU. And so it can get much more popular, and not only for a class of people who can pay some GPUs at $2,000. And okay, that's it.
Rajiv, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Thank you. Manish, there's a lot of questions around real money gaming and its viability for the long term in India. So obviously, real money is not something that's sort of, you know, been big in other geographies as well. And in India, you know, there is this question about its legal validity, and some questions are being asked. So what do you think is the story? I mean, obviously, it's the largest chunk of the market right now, you know, and where is it going? What do you think?
So if you look at it, India has beautiful opportunity of multiple gaming offerings growing all together. So whether you're looking at in-app purchase driven growth happening in the games like PUBG and Free Fire and 8-Ball Pool, they are all growing. Then you have opportunity of esports, which is growing very, very fast on top of these shooting games or your RTS or even your sports games. And then you have the whole real money gaming happening. And what is happening is gaming is kind of really intersecting with sports, where a play along second mobile screen and then you can really have a trivia happening or a sports fantasy happening, and then you can really gamify the whole sports viewing experience and to really convert that into a gaming opportunity. Or you have a gaming opportunity happening around casual games, and like we were discussing, I think Kai was talking about that whole mass at the bottom of the pyramid, which is where we call the definitions of casual, mid-core, and hardcore are getting blurred. It is about the emotional drivers, what is like really motivating me to play, and these guys who really are spending 2-3 hours on their mobile phones every day. They don't call themselves gamers, but they are playing these games because the driver is that, can I make some more money, and can I make money instantly, can I make money quickly, and my downside is very low, my upside can be very high. And these are the games which, as we all say in game design, easy to pick up and play but difficult to master. And that's where the balance between fun and frustration keeps swinging, and then hope and despair keeps you going. So I think that's where the desire of real money gaming really comes into picture. And around the legality, non-legality, I think it's a separate topic in itself. Suffice to say that there is it's a statutory, which is in India, it's a central law and it's a state law, and you would never get a very perfect answer from anyone, whether you hire the top legal firm or you hire anyone. So you can't get a perfect answer in a yes/no binary answer. So it can be more belabored, nuanced answer, but I don't want to bore you guys on that. But I think what is happening here in the India is that we didn't have the multiplayer infrastructure. We didn't have a micro transaction infrastructure. Really, while the 20 year, 30 years of infrastructure of, like, I was traveling in East in 2012 and in Korea, and I was traveling from Busan, from Seoul. So from Seoul to Busan, and in that bullet train at 300 kilometer per hour, my internet speed was much, much better than today. And this I'm talking about 8 years back. And what I saw about esports happening in stadiums. So we have a very nascent business here. Big nascency is also because of the infrastructure issues, and the habit formation from in-app purchase is more evolved gamer behavior, where you are trying to compete with yourself or trying to compete with others, and that leads to more either a collaborative desire or a competitive desire, which leads to an in-app purchase happening. And now that really comes when you're playing multiplayers. I think we are just started on the journey. We are 2-year-old in that journey rather than 20-year or 30-year-old in that journey. And that's why we would take some 7-8 years for that in-app purchases to really kick in. About 200 million or 300 million people doing in-app purchase versus 50-60 million people doing in-app purchase, and ARPUs or ARPPUs increasing for every player. So I think we are very firmly on that journey. The revenues of PUBG have demonstrated the potential. The top 5 games, 10 games in the grossing charts of freemium are really showing some promise. The ratio of downloads to paying are still very low, but yes, we are surely on that path, and we have the dividend of the volume. And as that volume starts kicking in, you will see India rising up very fast on charts of top grossing countries. We are, I think, number 2 already on the top download kind of countries on gaming. So I think it's all changing. The beauty of this market is all models are going to grow. So if you are really looking for hyper growth, this is the place to really come and really enjoy the ride. But it's, as I said, patience and perseverance is the key in this market.
Sorry, this muting, unmuting is getting a little. So one more question that has come up has to do with physical sport versus e-sport. I think, I think we have spoken a little bit about this, but the question is really, do you think the e-sport world and the physical sport are merging? There's a catch-up that's happening, and how are these two things sort of working with each other? The panel, any thoughts on this?
So I would love to there's one myth which I have heard multiple times, and that esports does not require physical strength, physical stamina, physical capability, mental capability. And many of my learned friends in the investment industry think esports is for couch potatoes and they'll keep munching chips and then doing this. I really beg to differ, and really with humbleness want to tell them that if you ever see a professional esports player playing, it requires really the same high standards of physical strength, mental strength, concentration for you to really be competitive at the highest level of even in India and not just global. Your reflexes, your ability to coordinate and do both hands together, work with them at the same time, strategize your reflexes, your tenacity to play for 8 hours. I think it's a very big myth, and I want to use this forum to kind of dispel that myth once for all, because that's something is really comes when people have really not seen, spoken these boys in action, and the shelf life is 14 to 22, 25. After that, they are not able to compete. The reflexes do slow down. Even if all of us on this panel want to think we are still very, very, very sharp, but we will not be able to compete with a 10, 15 year younger. Second thing, I really believe that the experience and the viewing quality, whether it's NBA 2K or whether it's FIFA or whether it's cricket, what we are trying to do in India, you will see it in coming years. I think these realistic simulation of sports games being converted into esports is, along with a fascinating commentary in the languages, in the regional languages, is going to be a super powerful entertainment package, which will enthrall many, many audience and will disrupt these sports in India, I can tell you. And Kai and others can talk about their own countries.
Yeah, on this one, I think I wanted to specifically ask a question to Kai. Kai, you remember you and I spoke about the fact that today is not the age where you need to be 6'3", barrel-chested, can run 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, and all that good stuff for you to be a good esports player. And actually, it's a lot more participative in terms of the sport as compared to traditional sport. Manish seems to be saying actually, you still have the same divide in the esport world as you do. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I would love for you to disagree, of course, but what's your thoughts? Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a reason why you see most professional gamers are very young, right? The twitch that you actually need to control at the highest level is something that you lose over time, right? And it's no different than the top athletes over time kind of losing their skill in speed or stamina. And so, I do think that the top most competitive players, have a unique skill set that allows them to sort of compete at this highest level. What I would say is, if you look at the way sport, and, we are a fund that invests in sports as well, not just esports and gaming. And, we say this about sports. In the US, there was The Last Dance, which was the Jordan documentary. And while there was no basketball on, and there's 9 million people tuning in to watch it, right? There's an appetite to continue to still be a fan, right? To still engage in your sport and your favorite team. And so, I think this is similar to what we'll see in esports, which is there's an affinity and a desire to kind of follow this as well. But, there's still millions of kids globally. And sorry, can you guys just mute? It's really a strong echo. You have millions of people, and you guys know this. You're in Europe. There's people who play soccer, play football, and they know they're not going to go pro, but they enjoy playing the sport, right? And so they might play at high school level, right? They might play at a college level. They might play intramural or pickup, but they know in their mind they're not going to go and become a professional player. And I think the point that I tend to make most of the time is that I think there's a very big difference between saying that like every kid who plays video games wants to be a professional gamer is the same way of saying like a kid who likes to play football and pick up in the street and juggle a soccer ball around wants to be the next star for Ajax or PSG. It's just not true, right? And people know that, and there's a certain recognition. And so my perspective here is, yes, there will always be people that want to compete and get to the top. That requires a very unique skill set. But there are still millions of youth sports players out there that play sport, and there will be millions of people that play esports. In the US, we have a company, Play Versus, and they organize high school, esports tournaments. Right? Not every single one of those kids thinks they're going to go pro, but it's a good way to have a social activity with friends after school, that keeps them occupied and engaged, and gives them something to do, as opposed to running around in the streets. And so I think it is important to put those into perspective.
Super. I also see some action on the sidelines. I see Pranav, one of my good friends and an investor into our fund, sort of doing side deals on the side there. Way to go, Pranav. Keep it up. In the meantime, I think we come to the last question, perhaps, in terms of the conversation, and I'm going to try and intersperse this with the audience conversations as well. And this has to do a little bit with the future, right? So in many senses, we now are in a world, very strange world. Microsoft and Facebook have suddenly become close friends, and they've nixed Mixer, which is quite interesting. And poor Ninja is now, I don't know where he's going to kick now. So basically, that's something that's gone on. Google Stadia, even after 1 year, is still looking to figure out what its mojo is, right? And 10 cent is worth a lot more than 10 cents right now. And obviously, it's got a lot of stuff that's happening. And we've been hearing perpetually about AR and VR. And, as you said, I think, Kai, earlier, we are still waiting for AR and VR to happen, which is quite interesting as well. So where do we go from here? What is the future? What is the storyline? PC to console, power in the hand versus power on the cloud. Who owns the content? Where is the content going to come from? Is it content that's global? Is it local? Is it traveling from the physical world to digital world? I mean, I'm throwing a lot of things here, but sort of if you wear your future hat and sort of predict some things, say these are the kind of trends that would go on. What would be the thing that you would sort of think about? So, I don't know. Does anybody want to start here?
Yep.
Yvonne,
yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I can. I believe that with 3G, people started to stream music a lot, and with 4G, they started to stream video a lot. And I believe that 5G is definitely providing a new generation, and a new step for video games, because people will stream video games like today. They are all streaming music and video. I think that's a very big point. And I believe in convergence. I believe that tomorrow, people won't be playing only on this console or that PC or this Mac. And I think this is over. This is part of the old world. And tomorrow, you can play what you want on any kind of platform. You don't even think about that. Still thanks to streaming. And in terms of content, I can see local content getting more and more important. Each telco we are signing with is asking us to provide some local content, so from Indonesia, Taiwan, and maybe tomorrow in India. And I believe that's interesting because people are getting more and more connected, and with connections worldwide, not only with their friends but with other people. But they still need to get their roots strengthened as well, and so they want some local content because video games is taking part of the culture of each country, and so these cultures are also going, from a generation to another one through video games tomorrow, and so local content is part of that as well. And so yes, I believe in more local content and more streaming solutions, and a great support from 5G, from the 5G.
Excellent. Reinhard, anything on the Mixer, Twitch? Amazon, that entire story, Facebook and Microsoft suddenly become best buddies.
Yeah, that's a good one. As far as Apple has been rejecting and making a bit of a fuss with Facebook, interesting. What I actually, because we talked about the whole idea of Apple and when we sense when elephants are fucking around with elephants, stay out of it. I for a long time, I've actually heard that people are saying in the industry that you could play at any given time on any device with everyone, and I think it's finally there. And well, today we're also talking about India, and I think that's actually the exciting moment in time for this country, where also with 5G coming to the party, it actually is going to open up really a new window for a lot of Western game developers. So to that point, I completely agree with what Manish said earlier in this webinar. It makes India extremely interesting. Besides the fact of the Google and the Apples and whatsoever, 5G cloud, India, I would say new devices, better devices for an affordable price makes suddenly India so much more interesting than the years before, because it was very a difficult country from Western developers to to focus on, it was a long shot. And I think it will be very interesting to see how Western game studios can work with a company like the one of Manish.
Super. I'm going to get into one more theme that has come up that we have not touched upon.
Oh,
but,
hold on. I just want to make one clarifying statement around the Microsoft-Facebook partnership, which I think is important. You know, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg have been close for a very, very long time. He considers him one of his idols, and you know, Microsoft invested 240 or 250 million in Facebook in 2007 at a $15 billion market cap and evaluation. And so, you know, that stake they've held on to. And if you look at that now, it's worth tens of billions of dollars. So those companies have actually been incredibly close with one another for a long time. And, you know, I think it's important to not discount that. You know, what Facebook is good at with its network effects business, and what, you know, Microsoft is good at with its core software and technology have been complementary with each other for years. So I actually I'm surprised actually to the extent that people thought this is a newfound partnership. Whereas it's actually been a very long-standing, close relationship that they've had, and they've worked together on multiple projects around powering cloud infrastructure and using their services. And I think that Microsoft tends to view Amazon as its #1 competitor now. And so when you look at, you know, the enemy of my friend is my enemy, is like, this is a perfect example of when people come together like that. So.
Got it. Excellent. So moving on to the next question in terms of Kai, are you saying anything or?
No, sorry, I have a special guest visitor who's here.
Okay. So moving on to the next question, there are a lot of questions about careers in gaming, and I think we spoke a little bit about, you know, you don't just need to be a game developer. There are lots of other things that are available there. You know, maybe all the panel, you know, each of you could just get started off with, you know, sort of talking about what kind of careers exist. See, I think the question that we are coming from is India is a very software-led nation. You know, we obviously have had IT services going for us for a reasonably long while. And the thought process here is, if that's true, then, you know, where are we going in terms of what the conversation is? I just thought if you could just get started off, you know, Manish, could you sort of talk about what kind of careers are there out there, and, you know, we can go through the panel?
Sure. I think if you look at the whole gaming value chain, this is the only industry which two of you can start your own company and try to make a game out of it. You could be a game developer. Within that, you could be a programmer, you could be a graphic designer, you could be an animator. So within the production itself, there are so many nuances which you could look at. Now, you don't want to be a gaming guy, then you could really come on the publishing side, and you can figure out how to really create a growth hacking through ASO or through partnerships or through user acquisition marketing, or creating some kind of growth hacks within the product for referrals. Now, if you want to really move further and you want to really become part of it, of esports ecosystem, you could really become a caster, you can become a commentator, you can become a streamer, you can become a game player. A player is a career, and it's a very legit career. A lot of people, at least the professional top 50 people, are making enough and more, which is more than the first jobs. So you could do that. So there is some bit of kind of the opportunity in the gaming, which is emerging, and it will keep growing as the industry keeps growing within India. 10 years, 12 years back, it was so difficult for me to really find people who could understand the game design and grammar of game design. Today, with so many companies in India, so many large establishments like Zynga, Glue, Ubisoft, EA, and Indian companies like us, Nazara, Moonfrog, Octro, there's so much of employment happening that you could really be part of any such company if you really want to learn your ropes and then become an entrepreneur. So opportunities are galore. Only one thing which is there in India, where we do not have a system of degrees and diplomas from our marquee colleges or our universities, which is, I think, is the process in which people like me are working with Skill Development Foundation or government to really figure it out, what kind of courses can be created. Unlike in Singapore or in Canada and US, there are universities offering courses in the full BTech courses in gaming, or it's a 1-year specialization in gaming. I think that's the next thing which is going to happen here as the market keeps evolving. More international players are coming. As Reno was saying, that this would be perfect market for a lot of big, all global companies coming in India, and they would need a local talent. And we have already proved our mettle on analytics, on engineering, on art. You would be surprised to know that in Bangalore, there are so many companies which are creating the whole backend art, programming, production for AAA titles on PC and mobile. So that's already happening here. It's the game design part, which is something which comes from experience of playing and being trained, and that something is happening. 10 years back, we had 3 successful companies. Today, we have 20 successful companies which have proven their success on in-app purchases and consumer psychology, data, and all of it. And I really believe in next 3 years, we'll have 200 successful gaming companies in this country.
Got it. One next question. Basically, the question is, Rhino, do you really think, what do you think about Google Stadia? Well, they've been at it for a while. What's the story there? Do you think that they're, how they fared? What is the story there?
Okay. Well, just to be honest, I have to log off after the answer. But Google Stadia, I think a lot of people do have an opinion about it. I think it's as many things that Google has acquired or brought in the past, it doesn't always mean it will be successful. I also think by rapidly getting people into a project doesn't mean that it has heart, soul, and DNA that fits with the gaming. I do see what they have, so the good intentions are there. Now they first tried to actually get more content to Google Stadia. Now they actually are producing it or developing it themselves, which is sort of working towards, a proven model, a user case. I'm not convinced, but that's an easier way of saying. I mean, I don't work on it day and night, and I know lots of people are so I would give it a shot for the next 12 months, and it's the same like Microsoft turned off Mixer. They give it a shot. They did try. And the same with Google Stadia. It's all about community. It's all about acceptance of the gaming community. And if they are able to do so, then they have a shot. But so far, it doesn't really look good.
Understood. And that sort of brings us to the end of this webinar in a broad way. Does anybody have any closing statements, or are we sort of good to close at this moment? I'm
good, thank you. It was.
I wanted to thank you actually for arranging this all, and everyone that is actually watching. Thank you much for taking the time. I guess we all have different angles of how we look at gaming. So if anyone has questions, then feel free to go via Rajiv. I'm more than happy to follow up later on.
Perfect. Thank you so much, folks. I think we've got a good whole house. So, Manish, sorry, you had something to say.
No, I was.
No, we're saying hello to each other.
All right, thank you so much, folks. Wonderful. Great that we could catch up. We would like to do more of these, so let's stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.